welcome back. Now I know what you're thinking, we're doing an interesting gear video and I'm not on the throne. Well, this isn't the same as some of my other unboxing videos. This particular one's going to take some tools right from the get-go. So, I received a package today. Would you believe me if I told you there's an entire guitar in here? What I've got here today is the new DIY kits from Koloss Guitars. Now, I've seen these things floating around for a little while now, and I've been very intrigued, particularly by the material choices. Now, this is their kit, or what I would call more of a budget model, and that's partly because they construct everything and they put it in the box for you to assemble yourself. Now I bet you're wondering what I mean. So let's break into it and start looking at some of the parts and pieces.
Future Miles here. If you want to skip to the sound demo and the overall review of it, I'll have a timestamp down below and you can skip right ahead to that if you don't want to watch the building portion of it.
What comes inside the shipping box is a very lovely looking white custom box made for these guitar kits. Alright. Very nicely packed box. Very well constructed. Alright, let me change the camera angle so you can get a better look at what's inside of this box. Now, the first thing that I want to note here is how well packed this is. You got to appreciate the extra time and care that went into cutting all these extra slots, giving you all these extra little boxes. Like this one is the hardware. You got the electronics box here. You got strings, and all the parts and pieces fit into their own little individual slots. I'm going to bust these out of the box and we'll start going over the parts. Alright, and here's all the parts laid out. So as you can see, you've got every part and piece for a guitar all in that one little box. Just a little assembly required. So now the ultimate question is, it's a guitar. Now how does this fall under the unique, weird, and interesting category? Well, this is using some very unconventional material. Most noticeably, and what caught my attention right off the bat, was the fact that this body is a chambered aluminum body. Yes, you heard me right. This is aluminum. So it looks like it was cast in two separate pieces. It's bolted together all the way around the body for the two separate halves. But on top of that, I very much like the look of this design, and it feels very well made right out of the box, not having done much with it, albeit it's a little cold. It's very light. God, it can't be more than a few pounds without any hardware in it. Of course, that's going to be more once we get it all together. But it's also got a super thin body. It's very thin around the edge. My caliper here, just to see exactly how thick it is. So around the edge, it's only about 16 millimeters. That's crazy thin. And then it fattens out to about 39, 40 millimeters, which is about just over 1.5 inches, and less than 3/4 of an inch on the side, just over 1/2 inch. So it's very much thinner than I'm used to in most guitars. But the other notable factor about their guitars is the fact that for these kits, the neck and the fretboard is completely constructed out of carbon fiber. And I mean, you can feel it right off the bat. That thing is very stiff, very strong. It looks like it was a couple different pieces You can kind of see some seams in here, although they were ground down to be nice and flat. And look at those markers. They're brass. Now this is 24 frets. It is a scale length of 25.5 and the radius on the fretboard is 12 inches, which is a little less than I normally go. I like about a 14 to a 16 inch radius, but it doesn't feel that bad. It feels pretty thin, but not like Ibanez thin. So it's a nice in between. What I'm curious of with this being constructed completely out of carbon fiber is they put a truss rod in here, and I don't necessarily see a truss rod being 100% necessary in a carbon fiber neck, being that carbon fiber is as strong of a material as it is. I mean, it's used in excess with truss rods just to keep the neck straight. So I'm really curious about that once we get it all together. We've got a fender style trim, and then your plate covers are also aluminum, which is also finished in that black paint. So far I'm really impressed. It looks like it was very well thought out, very well constructed, and the packing was just beautiful. I see some higher end guitars that don't get shipped in that well of packaging. Obviously I'm sure they can spend a little bit more on it because it's broken down. So there's two main things that I want to look at. I was very interested in the materials, and not only just the materials that they're made out of, but how it sounds and how it feels while it's played. But I'm also really curious how quickly you can set it up. Now it's getting late here, so I'm going to have to wait until tomorrow or the next day to start assembling this. But what I want to do is I want to start a stopwatch and see exactly how long it takes me to put it together. Now you got to take that with a grain of salt because I put guitars together quite frequently, so that might be a little skewed from you doing it. But so far, I'm really impressed with this, especially for the price point. These are running about $349, which for that low of a price, you would think it would be more of beginner mid-range instrument, but the quality feels really nice. But obviously, we'll have to know more once we can plug it in. So we'll come back, I'll start at the stopwatch, and we'll see how long it takes to put this thing together. Alright, I'm not going to make this into a tutorial video, so I may be skipping through, and I may be taking breaks here and there. But let me go ahead and start my stopwatch, and we'll see how long this takes to build. I don't know if you can tell that there, but it's about an hour, 10 minutes, and it's fully assembled. Now, this is definitely going to need a setup, and everything's going to need to be adjusted to get it all in place and make it really comfortable while playing. I've already noticed that the nut is a little high, so I'm going to have to address that. So, I'm going to give this a full setup, and then we can do the sound demo. Final thoughts on this Koloss kit guitar. I really like it. It is a very unique design, very unique concept, I mean, with the material alone. And it leaves a lot of room to be upgraded, which I think would make it even better. Being that this is a completely chambered aluminum body, it has a very unique resonant sound. So it's louder than your average electric guitar because the sound is resonating through this body, and it's almost like a dobro, but not quite. But along with that resonance, it picks up every little sound. So swiping across the strings, you can hear that squeak resonating through the metal body. These pickups, knowing that they were a budget set of pickups, I wasn't expecting much, but they do leave a lot to be desired. They function, they do the job. It's not the greatest sound in the world, but it's not the worst one either. So with those being swapped out, I could see this being a heck of a lot better. But all in all, with this being a kit, I wouldn't necessarily even call it a kit. It's more of a just assemble it yourself. The way that I would describe this set is that it is the IKEA of guitar. You get all the parts and pieces and bolts and even the strings just to assemble it yourself. A few problems with this particular kit that I think that they could add in that would make it even better is that there was no list for the parts and pieces, specifically the bolts, and being that this is an aluminum body, there's a lot of threaded and tapped parts inside of here that the screws are not the same as what you'd get on an average guitar. So at first glance, that was a bit confusing to figure out. Obviously, I got through it in the end, and even with figuring out those pieces, it still only took me about hour 15, hour and a half to fully assemble it and set it up. The other thing would be a wiring diagram. Now, in Dan from Guns and Guitars live unboxing, there was a gentleman out there that told me there were diagrams on their website, which I did not see at first glance. So being that your selector switch here is a 6-pin, which isn't normal for a 3-way selector switch, that may throw some people off. And with the added dippy switch or DP DT switch. So that would be a little confusing for anybody starting out who isn't familiar with wiring. If they could add a diagram into that kit, I think that would help leaps and bounds for a lot of people. And by all means, if you want a diagram, leave me a comment below. I can share one with you. Now, like I said, there's a few different ways you can wire those switches, but the way I wired it works just fine, and I just basically did it off memory. I like to have a wiring diagram handy just in case I need to reference it. But everything turned out fine, and if you like the sounds that come out of it, feel free to reach out. I will gladly send you those wiring diagrams. As I've stated in previous videos, the first thing I always check is the frets, particularly the overhang and the sharpness of the frets. These frets are actually really well done, and I hardly had to do anything with them. Now, I know that seeing other people's reviews, that is not the case across the board. That being said, I know that with those other people, the work is done. They just may have missed a couple things here and there, which I would say wouldn't kill this whole thing. I'm just impressed as how well it's done. And normally when you get a guitar like this, they are not great and have a lot of sharp frets. I always say no matter what guitar you buy, just know offhand you're going to have to do some work to it. I don't want to downplay anybody for those pieces because those are things that you're going to always have to work on. So it's things that I expected. When I was doing the setup and looking at the frets and everything else, I noticed that they leave the nut really high, which is fine. As I said, I expect I'm going to have to do a setup. But they glued the nut in. Now, with how high it is, and again, I've heard others talk about this too, but with how high it is, it looks like it was intentional and left that way so you had to do some of the work. But then why are you gluing it in? Just leave it with the hardware. I found that this tuning stability, once the strings settled in, is really good actually. I mean, obviously when you put a new set of strings, they gotta stretch, but since then, it's held tune very well. With that being said, talking about hardware, one of the things that kind of bothered me, and it's a small thing, so I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker. It's things that I can myself switch, but you went with all black hardware, and I know that's the case with all of the kits for the most part, but all black hardware, black knobs, black bridge, black tuning keys, but you have these odd accents, like chrome and brass here, brass inlays, chrome whammy arm, chrome switches. The brass inlays are fine. I think that that is a nice touch on the neck. But why the other pieces? That kind of throws off the whole aesthetic of this, especially in the color that I have here. Go all black, or go all chrome. It's not that hard to do. It looks like you just kind of threw some things together. Now, like I said, it's a small thing. I can switch those parts just fine. This is a boutique guitar, and I would say it's not for everybody. I mean, just like any other boutique guitar out there. But with that being said, with how many years the guitar has been around, the design is going to get pushed. It's going to get played with. It's been hundreds of years, and my biggest problem with people downplaying boutique guitars, and before you start, going off in the comments about how terrible this idea is, again, it's a boutique guitar. It's not for everybody. But to be set in this mindset where you can only make it the one specific way doesn't let you expand your horizons any. Gibson and Fender both dealt with the same flack when they came out with the electric guitars, because it wasn't acoustic. That was what they had. I mean, Les Paul played on a log when he first started, and until he put wings on it that made it look like an acoustic, nobody wanted anything to do with it. Alright, now that little rant is over, let's talk about this neck. They advertised at first that this was carbon fiber. This isn't completely carbon fiber. It is a plastic impregnated carbon fiber. Now I know, you immediately hear plastic and you say, oh god, that's terrible. It's actually not. This neck actually feels really good. It's really stiff, it's really sturdy. And I don't see myself having to do a whole lot of adjustment on that truss rod. Now you could immediately tell what it was when I was drilling in the tuning keys. It was just too easy to put those screws in for it to be solid carbon fiber. But again, with that being said, it feels really nice. It's slim, it's very similar to a Fender neck, but I would say even a little thinner. The placement of the input jack on the back here, that was a choice. They made that choice. I like the idea, but I don't like the practice. With the way that angles, if I were to stand up, I mean, that's a really poor choice. It goes down into your hip. I mean, depending on where your strap is, but you end up putting pressure on your cable, which isn't good. When you're sitting down, it's fine, because the way that this is angled, your knee is over here, so it's actually hanging off this way. If this were just a sit-down instrument, that would be fine. But I'm gonna do something about that. The ultimate question, do I think it's worth it for that price? When they fix those couple quirks, yeah, I'd say it's worth it. There's a lot of possibility to upgrade this, and that is what I like about this a lot. But hopefully, with all that being said, this has given you a better understanding of this kit. I would say that with all of the reviews that I have personally seen out there, that seeing what others have gone through with it, I had a couple of the issues with this, but I would say that mine is a very good example. I wasn't missing any parts. It really didn't have a lot of the other issues that other people were talking about. I would give this kit an 8.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. With that, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time.